Law kids, it's time to learn about the structure of Canada's court system. You've already learned a little bit about the history of law, about the structure of the Canadian government that makes the law. Now it's time to get a handle on how cases work their way through the court system. There's a lot of hierarchy here, and I just want you to have a clearer understanding of what types of cases go in which direction in this system. So here's a general overview of the system. Now, this looks really complicated at first. I want to let you know that for the purposes of a grade 11 Canadian law class, we're not going to talk about military courts at all. So ignore that branch on the left-hand side. And then we're really not going to get into federal administrative tribunals or the types of cases that would go to tax court or the federal court of appeal. So you can ignore those right branches. Really, our focus is going to be right down this line. So starting from provincial courts, I will tell you a little bit about some provincial administrative tribunals like the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal and so on. But mostly, we're really just going up this line here. Provincial courts, superior courts, the provincial courts of appeal, and the Supreme Court of Canada. That's going to be our focus. So, one of the things that I have to admit going up front is that when we see courtrooms on television and in film, they always look like places where really dramatic and exciting things are going on. Let's take a look at some of those stereotypes that are exaggerated when we look at courtrooms on TV.
Please rise. Court is now in session. Judge Seymour Watson presiding.
All rise.
All rise.
Family Court of 5th District, Los Angeles County, now in session. The Honorable Barbara Munson presiding. All rise.
All rise. For the Honorable Judge Marshall Stevens.
Honorable.
How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty?
Oh, guilty, but with a real good excuse.
They plead not guilty.
The defendant is not guilty.
You're the one who's guilty.
I'm going to set your bail at $3,000.
Your bail is $20,000.
$50,000 bail for $50,000.
$2,000 and bail throw this jackass out of my court.
Yes, Your Honor.
Call the first witness.
I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So anyway.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And the truth shall set you free.
I know this isn't easy for you.
What were these other photographs of, Mr. Burke?
Is that a question?
Did you say utes?
Yeah, 2 Utes.
What is a ute?
I am instructing my client not to answer that question on the grounds of self-incrimination.
The prosecution is not going to get that man today. No. Because I'm going to get him.
I object, Your Honor. This trial is a travesty. It's a travesty of a mockery, of a sham, of a mockery, of a travesty, of 2 mockeries, of a sham.
I move we dismiss claim for damages on the grounds that those women were not his.
Shut up. I don't want these 2 fellas pitching knuckleballs at me at the same time.
I object, Your Honor.
Sit down. Your Honor, I object.
You would.
Faster.
I need to strike that from the record, Your Honor. It's speculation.
So stricken.
Objection overruled.
Overruled.
To overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now you may proceed, Mr. Biegler.
Your Honor, I'd like to say a few words to the court, if I may.
Now listen, this is a cross-examination murder case. It's not a high school debate.
You make it coming here.
Then you're just a bunch of lousy, yellow, stinking cowards.
Sir, you're out of order. Order in the court.
Order.
Your Honor?
Shut up.
Write down, Mr. Bicoda. You're out of order.
You're out of order. You're out of order.
Is that justice?
You must learn the law.
What do you love about the law, Andrew? Many things.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I know you've spent all morning listening to Mr. Broigo talk. I know you're hungry.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've heard a lot here today, and I'm not going to try to go back over it all again for you.
I'd hate to be in your shoes today. You have a lot to think about. You've seen much hidden evidence the American public has never seen.
If we are to have faith in justice, we need only to believe in ourselves. In the name of God, do your duty.
Have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. We find the defendant not guilty.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Clay Shaw, not guilty. All right. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All all right. I hope you enjoyed that little trip down memory lane through some really famous law movies there. I wonder how many of them you may or may not have recognized. Meanwhile, back in Ontario, the courts are perhaps not as filled with drama as you might think. One of the things that I love to do is take my students on a tour of the courthouses. Usually I take my students up to the Brampton courthouse in grade 11, and then we head to Toronto and see 3 courthouses in one day. Obviously with COVID, that's not possible right now, so I'm going to show you some pictures of some different courts around the province. You may be familiar, or you may have driven past the Brampton courthouse. That's a really modern-looking building. In a lot of small towns across Ontario, you have buildings that look more like the one on the right, and of course, there's everything in between. But we're going to start by talking about provincial courts, or what's referred to as the Ontario Court of Justice. These are courts that deal with really the bulk of cases that go through the system. Over 200,000 cases a year go through them. They deal with most of the criminal charges that are laid within a province, and there's about 150 different courthouses for the Ontario Court of Justice across the province. So the types of cases that they hear are criminal code offenses at a relatively minor level. So they might hear an assault case, a youth criminal justice case, a minor charge under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, like possession. They'll hear a lot of bail and preliminary hearing sorts of events, family court. And then the other thing that's really interesting, and one of the reasons I love taking my students to this building in the picture on the right, is that there are also a lot of specialized courts at this level. I think as social issues have become more prevalent, there's a recognition that some people need a specialized type of court that deals with their issue. So, for instance, there is a court that deals exclusively with domestic violence cases. And what that means is that all of the lawyers and the judges and the court workers and all of the personnel there have, really intense familiarity with that crime. Similarly, there's something called Gladue courts, which are courts that deal specifically with Aboriginal offenders, whether or not they're deeply connected to their Aboriginal heritage. But these are courts that can take into consideration some of the special factors that come into play when Indigenous people come into conflict with the law. Likewise, there are specialized courts both for those with mental health illnesses and also with drug treatment. So if there is a belief, these are called diversion courts. So there's lots of reasons why somebody might be arrested. If it becomes clear during the course of the arrest that the accused suffers from a mental illness, they can be referred to the mental health court as a diversion. And there, the focus really is on getting the person treatment, and in some cases that may mean diversion to community programs that support that person. Likewise, with drug treatment court, in this case, there's even an opportunity for somebody who is dealing with either alcohol or drug abuse to have the charges dropped if they successfully complete a treatment program. As part of that, they go into drug court once a week and do a urinalysis and step in front of the judge and report on how they're doing. And one thing I've always found really powerful with students is to take them into drug treatment court and just make them sit there for about an hour or so and see the types of cases that come forward and see the devastation that drug drug addiction can have on someone's life. Likewise, mental health court can be a really interesting place to go. I've had students be able to watch what's called a fitness assessment, which has nothing to do with physical health, but rather mental fitness to stand trial. So an accused might be brought into the courtroom and asked, do you know what day it is, what year it is? Do you know who that person is up there? What's their job? And they point to the judge, what's my job? And really make sure that the person is capable of understanding the criminal charges that have been brought against them. If they can't, then there's no way that it's fair for that person to stand trial. And so there may be a treatment order issued where the person can go to a psychiatric hospital, receive treatment, and get up to a point where they can understand and face the charges against them. So all of these specialized courts do really, really valuable work and handle a ton of the cases that go through the system. Judges at this level are appointed by the provincial government. It's supposed to be an impartial appointment, but sometimes having political connections doesn't hurt. In order to be a judge, you have to have practiced law, and that means being a lawyer for at least 10 years. At this level, they can hear criminal cases, youth cases, and family cases without a jury. And I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the sashes that judges wear, just because it's something that my students always ask about when they go to court. So a judge on the Ontario Court of Justice wears a red sash worn over their left shoulder, going down to their right side. Now, the judge that's in the picture on the right is a really interesting guy, Harvey Brownstone. I hope that link still works. But he's written extensively on family law. So if you're like me and you come from a family where there's been divorce and conflict and all that kind of stuff, you may really want, or if you're just interested in family law, you may want to check out his TV show. It's actually really, really good. And he's got a decent sense of humor too. There's also in these courts justices of the peace, and they handle some of the more minor work that's done. And the interesting thing is that to be a justice of the peace, you don't actually have to be a lawyer. You need 10 years of work experience in a related field. You need to have some sort of post-secondary, either university or college diploma. And they can hear cases like parking tickets, Highway Traffic Act offenses, so like speeding, impaired driving, violations of smoking bylaws or other municipal bylaws, trespassing. They can conduct hearings under the Mental Health Act, and they can also issue a warrant or a summons. Now, because they're not full judges, their sash isn't red, it's green, and they wear them over the left shoulder. I want to confess, this is a job that has caught my attention. It might be something that I apply for someday. Don't know. Anyway, if we're looking just in Ontario, the court system looks like this. So the Ontario Court of Justice that we just talked about deals with all of those sort of minor cases. And then family court is over here. Small claims court is for lawsuits under $25,000 that involve, two people that are in conflict. You damaged my car, I want to sue you for $5,000, that kind of stuff. And then there's a whole bunch of administrative boards and tribunals. So you might not know this, but there's a special education tribunal. There's the human rights tribunal. There's a whole bunch of those. But we're going to talk mostly about what goes on in divisional court and also over here in the Superior Court of Justice. So the Superior Court of Justice in Toronto looks like this. This is at 361 University Avenue, just north of, it's in between Queen and Dundas on University Avenue. Now, there are 52 courts like this across the province with 300 judges working. And these are the courts that hear the more serious criminal cases. So this is where you're going to see murder, manslaughter, and instead of drug possession, you're going to see drug trafficking cases. There are also civil matters from some as low as small claims court all the way up to big cases like bankruptcy and commercial issues. And they can also hear family cases. But I can tell you, having been in this building multiple times, most of what's going on there are serious criminal cases like sexual assault, drug trafficking. The big murder trials in Toronto all take place here. So, to be a superior court judge, you actually have to be appointed by the federal government. And again, you have to have been a lawyer for at least 10 years. You can hear serious criminal cases with or without a jury. Now, when there's a jury present, the jury decides on the verdict, guilty or not guilty. The judge decides on the sentence and makes sure that the trial runs fairly. There are also some family cases and civil cases that they can hear. But notice this judge, who's somebody I've met and worked with a little bit, Justice Kitely, has a red sash that goes over her right shoulder. But there's also a badge on their sash that features a gold sun with a royal crown. And it's sort of interesting. The red sash tradition, I believe, goes back, don't quote me on this, but I remember hearing somewhere that a red sash signified that a judge had the power to issue the death penalty. So the red was like the color of blood. I have no idea if that's true. I just think I read it somewhere. Now, check out this building. This is the Ontario Court of Appeal, located at Queen and University. It's also called the Osgood Court. It hears over 1,000 appeals a year. So if you lose a case at the lower court level, if you believe that the judge made an error of law, then you have the right to appeal. Now, there are 20 judges that work on this court. They always sit in odd numbers, usually just groups of 3, but in some cases they might group as many as 5. And they can hear appeals from any lower court. By this point, when you're getting to the Ontario Court of Appeal, you're not dealing with evidentiary issues at all. You're dealing with legal constitutional issues. So frequently these cases involve some early consideration of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now here's a picture of me and a colleague and a judge and some students when we went to the Ontario Court of Appeal. The Ontario Justice Education Network, or OGEN for short, runs both a mock trial competition and a mock appeal competition. And these are my students after winning an appeal. So, as you've learned earlier, an appeal court is able to overturn the decisions made by lower courts. So, if somebody was acquitted and or somebody was found guilty, they have the opportunity to reverse that decision. They can also change the sentencing. So, if the sentence was too harsh, they can reduce it. If it was not harsh enough, they can increase it. They have 20 judges, as I said. The current Chief Justice is George Strathy. And the fun fact here, sorry, it doesn't apply to you guys this year, but when I do the Charter Challenge, I always tell my students this is the court that you would go to if you're selected to finals. So these students in this picture and dozens of other students that I've worked with over the years have been selected for Charter Challenge finals, and they actually go down to the courthouse in Toronto to this incredibly intimidating building, which I'll take you on a virtual tour of later, and they argue their case in front of a real Court of Appeal judge. It's pretty awesome. Last but not least, of course, we have the Supreme Court of Canada. As you know, this is the highest court in the land. They process about 100 cases per year, not as many, because there's only 9 judges, not 20, and also because each single case involves a phenomenal amount of work and research and reading and writing and oral arguments. It's a big deal if a case goes all the way to the Supreme Court. As you know, they have the power to review rulings that come from a lower court, but they get to pick and choose the cases that they hear, right? So they reserve their time for cases of national importance, or sometimes there might be a legal issue that's working its way through the courts in several different provinces, but the cases are all kind of similar. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll group those cases together and hear them all at once so that there is one consistent ruling on an issue across the province. So their options are they can uphold a decision that was made by a lower court, they can overturn it, they can change something and then send it back down for trial. So often they may decide that a piece of evidence should have been admissible or should not have been admissible, and they'll send it back down for trial. And they also, as you know, have the power to strike down a law if it violates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, the Supreme Court judges, check out these robes. Now, this is an old picture. This is back when Beverly McLaughlin was Chief Justice. She retired a couple of years ago. But these guys get silk robes with fur on them, bright scarlet. They're the fur is actually mink. You may have feelings about that. I don't know. Now, they don't wear these robes when they're actually sitting here in cases. They just wear like normal black robes. But when there's a new opening of Parliament, they show up and they actually walk into the Senate looking like this. So pretty cool. Now, I have a couple of random fun facts for you to close this out. You may not know this, but it's not possible to watch a Canadian trial court on television. But you can watch the Supreme Court, and if you decide that you want to give it a chance, then just click here, and it will open up to CPAC, which is the Canadian Parliamentary and something channel. I forget what the acronym stands for. I'm sorry. But CPAC shows not only hearings, you can watch the House of Commons when it's in session or the Senate, and you can also watch videos of the Supreme Court of Canada. So I'm not going to play this video for you here, but if you want to go back to just the plain PowerPoint, you can check this out. This is a case that I selected that I thought you might be interested in because it involves the Youth Criminal Justice Act and the right of a young person to be tried within a reasonable period of time. So you can check out that, and you can also sort of poke around the website and see a whole bunch of other appeal hearings that have taken place. What's interesting about these ones that are at the top is, of course, now due to COVID, the courtroom itself is actually closed. And so, believe it or not, I'll just start this one playing a little bit. The Supreme Court is actually using Zoom to conduct its trials. So if you can imagine, the judges are sitting in their chambers. There's this really dramatic intro that plays at the beginning of it. I think they're trying to make it look like an American court TV show or something. But if I fast forward into the video here, you'll see these are all the judges that are sitting in front of, I guess, a picture of the Supreme Court in the background. And then these guys are the lawyers that are actually about to argue the case. So, yeah, okay, they're doing Supreme Court hearings over Zoom. Pretty cool. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. You can't watch a trial case on television, but you can, through a website, watch a Supreme Court hearing. So that's kind of interesting. But by contrast, the United States is quite the opposite. It's quite frequent, if you've traveled there, to turn on the TV and to be able to watch a trial in real time on television. There's a whole channel devoted to it in the United States called Court TV, and you can watch everyday run-of-the-mill theft trials, assault trials, all that kind of stuff. But in the US, you can't watch American Supreme Court cases on TV. Isn't that weird? For us, it's the other way around. What's crazy, though, is that for U.S. Supreme Court cases, you can listen to an audio recording of when the lawyers argue their case in front of the judges, or you can read the transcript. And years ago, John Oliver decided to play with this a little bit. He's one of my favorite late night comedians. He can be a little risque. I want to warn you, the clip that you might decide to watch here. It's adult content, so there's a bit of colorful language and suggestive words and images that he uses, but most of it is fairly straightforward. Anyways, what he decided to do was take the audio recording and add in a video recording that he did. Well, here, I'll just let you see it. It ultimately resulted in the creation of this small YouTube channel called Supreme Court Dogs. And while it's loading, of course, you can probably guess what he did was he recreated the U.S. Supreme Court room, put a bunch of dogs in the chairs, here they are, of the Supreme Court judges, and then dubbed over audio clips of Supreme Court hearings. And the result is quite hilarious. I think most people would probably rather watch paint dry than watch a Supreme Court hearing. I mean, it's really technical. It's really full of jargon. It's not as dramatic as a trial. you're really just getting into constitutional issues. But I have to say, when you watch it and there's judges playing the part, or there's dogs playing the part of judges, it's infinitely more entertaining. So I'll leave it to you to go and watch that if you want to, and I will end it there with. Wait, where's my meme? There it is. Yes. Judge Judy says goodbye. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.